What if the story you trust to be ordinary keeps a second inventory after midnight? A list of names the scanners won't show, and one of them is yours. What if the motion sensors track someone walking behind you when every aisle looks empty, and the camera over self-checkout shows a face that isn't yours moving a half-second late? Some stories are too routine to be scary, until you realize the routine is the trap. Welcome back to my channel, Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. 5 Walmart night shift nightmares told like whisper confessions from people who thought fluorescent light meant safety. From a blue vest that hangs where no one works anymore to an intercom that knows your name, each story is a strange receipt you never wanted to print. You'll hear keys jingling where no manager stands, see a smile sticker that shouldn't be smiling, and feel the cold from the frozen foods aisles seep into places no jacket can reach. From eerie whispers to people who seem to clock out of reality, every tale is a mystery waiting to unfold. Which story creeped you out the most? Let us know in the comments and share if you make it to the end. Story 1. After hours in aisle 13, the scanner beeped and showed a price for my name. Not my badge number, not a misread UPC. My name. The hand held through a green blink like a nod, and the sound hung in the fluorescent hush the way a hell breath does. I wiped my thumb across the screen, and the residue felt tacky like sticker glue. Behind me, the dome mirror over the end cap reflected a second me who lagged by a blink, as if my reflection needed a moment to catch up, as if it thought first before moving. I told myself the reader was filthy and the lens was warped, but that thought felt like saying a mirror is lying, which is the kind of thing you only say once, right? I was on probation, and try and pretend I was not. New hire, 3rd week, overnight inventory. Alma ran the shift like a library, every page in order, every page on time. She told me if I reconciled aisle 13 before the 4 a.m. audit, they would make me full-time. If I failed, it would be the second job I lost this year, and I did not have a third in me. I had a habit of hiding mistakes and fixing them later. It looks like initiative when it works, and like lying when it does not. Trevor in receiving called aisle 13 cursed, and then said he was kidding, which is exactly how you keep a story alive. Aisle 13 had a crooked sign with fresh bolts that glittered like new teeth. The tape across the reset bay was clean and tight. On the pegboard, someone had left an old blue vest with a crumpled name tag that read Lila. The smiley rollback sticker on the end cap had a crease across the mouth that made it look like it was thinking of a frown. The handheld flashed item not found. Returned to sender, and then the intercom chimed once without a voice. In the mirror, my double blinked late again and raised a hand to the cage lock like a hint. Who was giving me a hint in a store that was supposed to be empty? The store map said aisle 13 did not exist anymore. The planogram said it was folded into school supplies and pantry. The handheld said there were pallets mapped to it anyway. I unhooked the caution gate and pulled the reset tape loose. It parted with a sound like Velcro tearing skin, a soft rip with a whisper under it. Solvent smell lifted off the floor wax and citrus cleaner rolled behind it. Too bright, like someone was trying to cover something else. I stepped in and my shoes squeaked like I had crossed a line I could not uncross, because I had, and pretending otherwise would be a lie. I rolled the price gun in my palm and pressed it to a box to test. The label shot out and the sticker clung to the pad of my index finger like a small tongue. I shook it, and it did not let go. When I peeled it, it left a film I could feel, but could not see. The handheld kept listing SKUs I could not find and dates that had not happened yet. Little futures printed in a black font like any other number. I could hear the motion sensors in the next 2 aisles clicking through their 15-minute cycles, a ticking you only notice when you are alone for too long. The clock said 12:28, and then for a second it said 12:35. Was that drift or theft? I told myself Trevor was a theft. He liked to hop on the PA and whisper his name like a ghost and then laugh in the walk-in. He carried keys he should not have because he was always helping. He knew where the cameras were. So I went to the office to check the feeds, because sometimes the fastest way to stop a joke is to aim a light at it. On the monitor, I saw me walk into aisle 13, and then 30 seconds later, I saw me walk into aisle 13 again. I had not done anything twice, and yet there I was, second me chasing, first me like a rehearsal. I reached for the PA mic to shut it off, because if Trevor was whispering, I would cut his stage. Alma would not like that, but if the whispering stopped, I could apologize later. I pressed the button, and the channel screen went dark with a thin hiss, like ocean in a seashell. Back in 13, a soft weight thumped behind me. The blue vest with Lila on it had slipped from its peg and landed upright, as if someone had set it down carefully. The name tag looked hand-cut, the letters sharp, the laminate older than the vest. When I bent to pick it up, the dome mirror at the end showed my reflection already standing, one hand out, mouth forming a word that looked like count, who was giving orders in my face. The intercom chimed once the way it does before announcements, and then took a breath. Not a voice, a breath. The sound of a person at the edge of a sentence. It said my name softly without saying it, the shape of it in air, the way a friend breathes before they admit something. I spun, and the air from frozen foods drifted across the gap between departments like a tide. The cold touched the side of my neck, and I felt my skin tighten, as if the chill could read. Trevor, I said, because I needed it to be a person with bad timing, and not something that knew my pulse. I pulled the seasonal cage key from my ring, because I realized every hint had pointed to the lock. If the planogram said Palace belonged to 13, and the camera showed first me leading second me, then the cage was a door that would stay a door if I did not open it. I opened it anyway. The metal gritted like teeth waking. Inside the cage, shrink wrap glittered not with light, but with time. Everything in there looked the same, and yet felt older. When I stepped just past the threshold, the aisle lights went out 2 minutes early. My handheld blinked, and the time jumped forward by 16 minutes, which is not a number lights use. What else was counting me besides me? My phone showed no service, and my radio battery bled red, like it had decided it was done trying. I swiped my badge over the inside reader for the cage, and it chuckled a dead tone. Alma's key card hung on my lanyard for emergencies, and it would not talk to the lock from this side. The motion sensors down 12 and 14 cycled neck, and neck toward dark, leaving my aisle like a spine lit up in a scan. Heat lived in the spaces where people had been earlier, and cold lived in mine. People talk about being alone as freedom. They never talk about who takes attendance after midnight. The handheld showed a queue of items due before 4 a.m., and the number did not shrink when I scanned anything. The more I counted, the more the count insisted there were parts of the store only I could see. The cage door eased a notch behind me like it had gotten tired of waiting for me to notice it. When I tried the PA again, it hissed nothing, like an ear pressed to a pillow. The smiley sticker from earlier had somehow moved. It clung to the scanner's backplate, the crease across its mouth deepening, a thought turning serious. If it had hands, it would have already reached for my badge. I needed answers, so I looked where the store keeps them. The remodeled binder in the office held overlays for layouts that never made a morning. Aisle 13 existed as a ghost on one of those pages, a pen-sketched corridor that ran colder than the surrounding grid, because the old freezer line had once bled across it. Phantom SKUs were artifacts from that plan, raised like bones when the new plan rubbed thin. I wanted that to be the whole explanation. I wanted to say old paper equals new shadows. But then I watched the office feed again and saw Trevor fast asleep on a chair, locked in by a door cam that shows every open and close. The whisper on the intercom used a tone the closed loop only makes when the office is locked. I needed a way to trick the motion sensors and finish before the audit, or Alma would see me for what I was. A good worker who lies to survive is still a liar to a clock. I picked up the blue vest. It smelled like the old break room where the microwave died, and kept counting. The name tag said Lila, the letters cut by hand. I slipped it on and felt the weight settle where a roll sits. The handheld vibrated and the inventory app changed colors like it recognized a position, not a person. The lights beyond the aisle went dim in a gentle circle that left 13 bright as noon. A soft breath rode the air where the intercom chime should have been. The store was paying attention now. At the far end of 13, the reflection in the dome mirror stepped one pace out of the mirror and waited. It moved half a second after me, then half a second before me, as if it was catching my rhythm or lending me its own. It had the old vest on. Not blue, but sun-faded blue. Different era, different cut. It raised the price gun and aimed at the air and squeezed. Labels fell with a dry bird sound. I could smell paper and adhesive, and the clean cold of a freezer run. The reflection beckoned, and I did what you do when the only person who seemed to understand your problem asked you to follow. A label slapped my chest and covered my badge. Not a joke, not a misfire. It hit with that small tongue sound and sealed. The sticker felt warm for a second, and then cooler than skin, the way metal feels colder than air because it steals heat faster. The smiley's crease finished its frown. I tried to peel it, and the corner refused me like a shut mouth. The intercom breathed close to my ear. It did not speak. It matched me. It wanted a rhythm to keep counting to. I felt the cold corridor line up with the reflections route like lanes painted on a floor I could not see. Somewhere behind me, the cage decided it was time and started to slide. I had always believed in a kind of store intelligence, but I meant the people, the way Alma could ration energy at the end of a long night, the way Trevor could move 3 pallets where 2 would fit because he thought in shapes, the way a team acts like a mine when it does not want it. The thing in 13 did not feel like that. It felt like a system set to complete a count, no matter what I had to call an item. Lila was not a person. Lila was a role, a vest the system could see when a human could not. Return to sender was not a joke. It was a code. Whoever wore, Lila got sent somewhere after the count. The price labels began to print by themselves from a gun I was not holding. They flicked against boxes, cages in my sleeve. The noise was polite and relentless, like rain you cannot complain about because you asked for weather. The reflection nodded in small approving beats whenever a label stuck true, and frowned when one hung crooked. I moved right, and it moved left. I stopped, and it counted past me. The breath in the intercom pulled close for the sound like a straw at the last of a drink. The cold along the old freezer line deepened until it felt like someone breathing on the back of my neck, which is wrong in the cold, which makes no sense. I thought about ripping the vest off and running to Alma. I thought about telling the truth and losing my job and keeping my name. Instead, I made the choice that trapped me. I pushed forward along the reflections route and raised my own price gun and matched it. I counted on the system to release me when it saw its job complete. I counted like a person trying to prove they were not a person anymore. The labels stuck in neat rows, and the handheld's queue finally started to shrink. For a breath, I felt relief. Then the scanner beeped my name again, gentler this time, as if it was confirming its spelling. I needed to trade something. That was a thought. Leave the vest, and the system will let me be a person again. I reached for the name tag, and it came away like it had been waiting for me to want that. The Lila badge lay in my palm, light as a paper coin. The reflection raised its price gun like a toast. I set the badge on the shelf where the cold ran and stepped back. The cage door hiccuped on its track and stalled. The handheld flash cue complete in a font that looked friendly. The intercom did not chime. It sighed like someone who had finally gotten what they wanted. At 4:02, I passed Alma by the office, and she asked if I was feeling better. I said yes, because I had not told her I was sick. She showed me the audit sheet and smiled like a math problem solved itself. The count for aisle 13 was clean, every box to the right of every number. I slid my time card from the rack and saw a punch-out at 3:47 that I had not made. The signature for the return receipt matched my handwriting, and I had not signed. Alma said good work, and her voice sounded far away for a heartbeat, like I was listening through the intercom from inside the ceiling. In the morning meeting, Alma announced a change. I was moving from general inventory to overnight inventory permanent. The way she said permanent made me think she was reading it off a screen. She handed me a fresh blue vest and a new badge clip. The vest felt identical, but the weight sat differently, higher on the chest, as if the fabric knew a job I did not know yet. I decided to return the old Lila tag to Lost and found only an empty peg and a clean square on the dusty board, where something had hung for years. I walked past aisle 13 just to prove it would look ordinary in daylight. The crooked sign looked straight from this angle. The bolts looked dull. The tape was back up, clean and tight, like time had reset around me. The dome mirror over the end cap showed a clear rectangle of polished floor, then my face again, a beat late. The second me raised a labeler I was not holding and made a small wave like a co-worker on a different schedule, saying see you soon. The cold from frozen foods crept down the seam and touched my neck, like a finger pressing a name into a form. In the break room, I reached into my vest pocket for my phone and found a receipt I did not remember taking. It was printed on that glossy paper that darkens with heat. The date at the top was next week. The return authorization number matched my employee ID exactly, digit for digit. Reason for return set position fulfilled. The bottom edge of the paper was warm as if someone had just torn it free. I put it back in my pocket like an apology and told myself I would ask Alma later, even as I knew I would not ask and she would not answer. If you have ever worked nights, you know the way the store becomes a body, a heart of freezers, lungs of doors, bones of racks, a voice that only speaks when you've been quiet too long. I tell myself it only wanted to count, that it only needed a placeholder to see its work finished. I tell myself Lila was a label, and I am a person wearing it for a while. Then I pass the dome mirror, and I see the second me still in the aisle, a half second late, still wearing the old vest, still waving with the gun, still patient as a clock that never runs out. The smiley sticker is on my new badge now. I do not know when it moved. The crease across the mouth is deeper. It is almost a line that wants to be a frown. When I press it, it feels cooler than skin, like metal, like a door handle in winter. Tonight the audit is at 3 a.m. instead of 4, and the motion lights are set to 10-minute cycles. That is what the memo says. The closed loop intercom breathed once when I walked in and then fell quiet. I am going to finish early and leave on time, and I am going to keep my job. If the receipt in my pocket prints itself again with tomorrow's date, I will tell Alma. I will tell her that my name keeps getting rung up at a price I do not recognize. I will tell her that the system knows me as a position and that it has a plan for what to do when I am done being useful. I will tell her that I think the store has been practicing a count that ends at 1, and tonight, that 1 is the person who thought they could outwork a name tag. I will tell her, unless the intercom breathes first. Story 2. The The blue vest in the mirror of my reflection lifted a hand and waved at me before I could move. Not a trick of light, not a lag. An intentional, polite little wave like we were already on speaking terms. I dropped the hanger I was holding, and it clattered across the backroom concrete like plastic bones. The sound ran under the buzzing fluorescence and came back thin and cold. I told myself I was overtired and that mirrors lie for free, but then the vest on the hook shimmered in the mirror like it was already on someone, and in the real room it just hung there, empty, waiting, almost breathing. Overnight restock is quiet if you keep your head down. You pull pallets, you face the shelves, you keep your numbers clean so your name stays clean. We were short-staffed, which is another way of saying nobody will cover for you if you fall behind. Alma had promised me more hours if I finished the seasonal aisle and the end caps before 6 a.m. I wanted that too much. Wanting too much makes you clumsy. Trevor said my eyes looked glassy, like I had slept with them half open. He laughed and said mirrors are two-way glass for management. I laughed back because you have to, but the way the dome mirrors blinked caught my breath like a burr. The vest had no employee number on the inside tag. That is not supposed to happen. Every vest has a number. The fabric looked normal in my hands, Walmart blue with linen in the seams, but in the mirror it had a faint metallic sheen, a fish scale shimmer that did not belong to cotton. I touched the tag again, like maybe the number would rise if I warmed it. It stayed blank, a little square of fabric with more attention than it deserved. My handheld scanner chirped. I had not scanned anything. The screen flashed double count and made a little heartbeat line across a line of UPCs. Who was scanning with me at 1:12 a.m.? I brought the vest to the breakroom mirror because I wanted to prove to myself that I was being dramatic. The mirror was bolted over a dented sink. I hung the vest, stepped back, and watched the reflection. In the glass, the vest slid off the hook and settled on shoulders that should have been mine. The fabric smoothed itself like hands had done it. I did not move. In the room, the vest had not moved at all. My phone showed 1:14. The clock in the mirror over my own shoulder showed 1:17. I swallowed, and it sounded louder than it should have. If you have ever heard your own throat tell on you, you know. I carried the vest back to the line and tried to shake it off my mind. Cardboard. Cutter. Face the shelf. Repeat. The aisles had that citrus cleaner smell people think means safe, but under it lingered something colder, like the air had touched metal and learned a new temperature. The handheld beep again, and the screen showed 2 entries every time I scanned an item, one in my name, one in an ID with a blank field. That should not be possible. Alma would say it was a system hiccup. Trevor would say it was management spying through the mirrors to see who slacked. I told myself I would check the office logs later, as if I was not already breathing like I had run. In paper goods, I met the first real wrong. I turned my head and saw me in the dome mirror 10 feet away, filling a gap I had not reached. It was not a lag, and it was not a replay. It was a short, competent version of what I was about to do. The reflection faced the shelf with brisk little taps and an efficient line of movement that looked like the way Alma works when she has to do everything with 2 hands. I raised my hand to wave, and my reflection did not wave back, because she had already waved at me in the back room and had moved on. That is when the vest on my arm felt heavier, like it did not want to dangle anymore. I tried the radio for some normal. Trevor's voice came through thin and cheerful, inventory humor to make the hours pass. When I asked if anyone was playing around with the mirrors, he said the mirrors are two-way glass for corporate ghosts, and then said, "Just kidding," and then did not answer when I asked again. Silence in an overnight store has a weight. It feels like a person holding their breath behind a door. I looked up on instinct, and the reflection looked up too, a fraction early, and smiled like it had heard a joke I had not. A stack of hangers slid off a table by themselves. No push, no bump, just that bright plastic clatter rolling out like a cue. The sound repeated down the mirror line, a little echo that moved faster in the glass than an aisle. The vest shimmered again, not in my hands, only in the mirror. I told myself I could end this with a simple, ugly choice. Put the vest on a sink and prove it was a trick, or smash a mirror and explain to Alma why we had to file an incident report before dawn. I did not want the kind of attention that comes with breaking things. I did not want to be the story that gives other people a story, so I tried to ignore both choices. I worked. I made myself count the way Alma taught us, with a low voice, with the numbers as a rhythm. 1, 1, 2, 1. The handheld kept stuttering the double count. Somewhere, the other side scanned with me, like a duet without music. I glanced up every few seconds and saw a delay that was not a delay. Sometimes a reflection anticipated me by a second, sometimes by 5. It felt like to me inside the glass was impatient, teaching, tired of waiting, at 2:03 by my phone. The mirror clock said 2:07, and then, just once, it said 2:11 and my stomach went cold. I went to the office to settle Trevor's joke, because red herrings are comforting when you get to hold the hook. The camera log showed Alma had not left the office for 28 minutes. The door cam registered every open. The PA audit showed no announcements. The mirror feed was not a thing because the mirrors are not cameras. That is what I told myself even while I stared at my own reflection in the little monitor and saw that in the dark glass of that monitor's reflection, in miniature, a person in a vest was moving through a different aisle entirely, faster than me, purposefully, like the night was a job it wanted to keep. Back on the floor, I found the vest not where I had left it. In the real aisle, it had migrated closer to the seasonal end cap. In the mirror, it hung neatly in air, as if on an invisible hook just at my shoulder height. I reached up without deciding to, and my fingertips brushed fabric that was not there. The feeling turned my breath quick and bright. I know how that sounds. I know I am making it sound haunted, because haunted is easier than malfunctioning, and malfunctioning is easier than being replaced. The dome mirror at the end of the aisle caught Trevor walking by behind me. He lifted a hand to point at a guilty stack of overstock and then paused. His eyes went right through me. He frowned. He stepped closer to the mirror and squinted, and I watched him not see me in the glass while I stood 6 feet away, waving like a lost person at a window. He cursed softly and tapped the glass as if it had fogged. Then he shook himself and kept moving, whistling the way people whistle when they do not want to admit they were spooked. Being unseen in a mirror is a very specific kind of loneliness. The vest pocket felt heavier. I slipped my hand in and touched paper. A receipt folded twice, still warm like it had been printed and folded by someone else a minute ago. The date at the top read tomorrow. The line items were nonsense. The bottom line said returned, and under that where a name should go to space was blank like someone was waiting to write. My handheld pinged me. A red message, friendly font. Double count resolved. I had not done anything to resolve it. The mirror me had caught up with me, or I had fallen into step with her. I could not tell which. I asked Alma, in the careful voice you use when you want to sound normal, if the system could ever show an employee clocked in 2 locations at once. She gave me the kind of smile that says this is about to be a teaching moment. She said no. Then she asked why I asked, and I said no reason. She asked if I was hydrating, because people see things when they're dry. I said I was fine. She watched me for a beat too long, like she had been asked to watch me by a second, invisible boss. When I left the office, the tiny reflection in the black monitor glass was already turning towards seasonal and the plastic hangers were trembling before they fell. I made my choice. I did not smash the glass. I put on the vest. The fabric settled like a thing that has been waiting to breathe. It adjusted itself against my shoulders and made a small noise like a satisfied sigh. The inside tag still had no employee number. The handheld chirped a new tone, simple and happy, and the double count shifted to single source verified, as if I had just become the right kind of instrument. My reflection stopped being early. It matched me exactly for one breath, and in that breath I felt competent, necessary, part of a larger motion that had nothing to do with needing approval or keeping a job. Then the reflection smiled without me and took a step into the hint of aisle in the mirror that did not exist in the room. It raised its scanner. It began to work faster than I could think. I tried to speed up, and it stayed a beat ahead. I tried to slow down, and it continued without patience. My phone said 3:02. The mirror clock said 3:09. Time is elastic when you are alone, but it does not usually come with two readings. The hangers clattered again, this time from an aisle I knew was empty. The sound came from the mirror. I felt the hair at the nape of my neck lift to listen. Trevor called on the radio and asked if I had time to help in toys. I looked toward toys and, in the dome mirrors, saw a version of me already there, lifting a case of action figures with brisk economy. I told him I could swing by in 10. He laughed and said thanks for clone. He was trying to make it feel easy. His voice filtered through thin and warm, and I wanted to believe that warmth could push back against whatever math the store was doing with me. The handheld pinged again. A pop-up I had never seen. New associate ID assigned. The number field filled with the code from the receipt in my pocket. At 3:20 by my phone, 3:28 in the mirror, Alma's radio voice came through asking for a status check. I gave a quick list. I did not say that my reflection was improving the list while I talked. Alma said good. Her voice had that distance it gets when she is watching 3 problems in her head and 1 on paper. I asked if the mirrors had ever been replaced with 2-way glass during remodel. Silence. Then a laugh she did not quite sell. She said if corporate was going to spy, they would hide better. She said if anyone was watching, it was me watching myself. The answer landed with an odd weight, like a red herring placed on a delicate plate. I went to the backroom sink again because I wanted to face the moment where the illusion can break. The same dent, the same bolts, the same unkind light. I lifted my hand and touched the mirror. The cool met my skin and stayed. My reflection did not touch back. She adjusted her vest and tilted her head like she was listening to someone behind me. I did not want to turn around. The receipt in my pocket warmed like a small animal. I unfolded it. The return stamp darkened as I watched. The field for name began to ghost letters. It formed the first 2 of mine, and then paused, like it wanted me to say it out loud. I pulled the vest off, quick, as if it were a live thing I had trapped without consent. The instant the fabric slid from my shoulders, the mirror image steadied, became a normal delay, human and forgiving. My handheld complained. Double count reappeared. Pallets behind me announced themselves with a creak, like they were tired of waiting for my decision. I thought I had learned the rule, where the vest and the mirror takes the lead. Do not wear it, and the mirror sulks and lags. I told myself I could finish out the night without it. I told myself that paper goods do not care who places them, as long as someone does, and that my name matters more than uniform. I lasted 8 minutes. The clock did its weird dance. My pile spread. The list in the handheld grew 2 items for every one I touched. I put the vest back on, not a surrender, I told myself, but as a tool. It tightened on my shoulders in a way I had not felt before, a snugness like the moment you are buckled into a ride that will not stop. because you raise your hand. The mirror smiled, tired and pleased. It nodded toward the door to seasonal. I followed because I felt late, like I had been late my whole life, and finally had a schedule that would not let me fail. Inside, seasonal the reflection was efficient and merciless. It refaced entire runs in seconds. It liked order more than I ever will. I tried to slow it with questions. Does Alma know you? Does the system need you because we are short-staffed? Are you a trick? Are you me? My voice sounded small against clicking plastic and neat cardboard. The mirror did not answer except to beckon, and when I did not move, it reached to where my arm should be and tugged air. The sensation landed on my body with a tiny pressure, like a child taking your sleeve. I stepped and the pressure released. We were doing this together now. I remembered Trevor's joke and decided kill it. I went to the office, to the logs, to the only proof the night respects. The door cam recorded Alma seated at her desk, pen in hand, head down. She had not moved for half an hour. If she had watched me through two-way glass, she did it from the desk without blinking. I rewound the camera that faces the corridor. Nothing. No one. I lifted my eyes to the dark reflection in the monitor, and there I was, both of me, one bending, one already standing. The monitor offered no playback controls for what was happening inside its own reflection. That is not a feature anyone builds on purpose. When I came back out, toys was done. The pallets were stripped clean. Trevor pointed at the aisle and gave me a mock salute. He said, "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." His eyes slid over the dome mirror, and he did not look at me even though I stood right in front of him. He asked if I was drinking water. I said yes. He said my lips looked cold. I wanted to tell him everything. But words have a way of making impossible things pick a side, and I was not ready to call this either miracle or trap. He tapped the mirror with two fingers like a knock and walked away. At 4:11 by the mirror, 4:03 by my phone, the handheld dropped a new screen. Time card notice. Simultaneous punches detected. I laughed in a breathless way that hurt my throat. I do not know why I laughed. I took the vest off again because I wanted to see if the message would reverse. It did not. The mirror kept working. I stood still. My reflection moved on. The vest hung on my forearm and pulsed with a weight that made no sense. I swore softly and slid back into it because I am not brave in the right ways. I am brave in the way that keeps a job. You would think the climax of a night like this would be loud, but it was gentle. The mirror me finished the last end cap, turned, and lifted her scanner in a small salute. Then she stepped one pace closer to me in the glass and beckoned with a downward palm, like you would for a child crossing a street. I leaned closer, and my forehead met cold that was not glass. It was a sense of a pressure trying to equalize between two rooms. My name bloomed fully on the receipt. The word returned darkened twice. The twist arrived as a simple sentence in my head, not a voice, just a conclusion I could not hear. The vest is not clothing. The vest is a role. The store does not need two of us. One will be returned. Returned to what? Returned to where? The mirror waited like a cashier who has said the total and holds out a hand. I imagine smashing the glass. I imagine slicing the vest into ribbon blue. I imagine telling Alma and watching her explain my fear into a policy. Instead, I nodded yes to my own reflection, because a yes that feels like competence is a dangerous thing to deny. The yes did not pull me through. It did not eat me or trade me. It did something worse. It made me a match. I felt my steps lock with hers, and for several minutes we were so perfectly the same that the world went quiet, like two engines synced until the vibrations cancel. We finished seasonal at 4:37 in the mirror, for 29 on my phone. The hand held lit green, audit ready. The radio crackled as Alma thanked us for the push. I took off the vest once more to see if I would fall apart without it. I did not. I was simply me again, with the memory of moving like a solved equation. At 5:50, I clocked out. At 5:50, I also clocked in. The time card printed a twin record with no error flag. Alma frowned at the kiosk like it had become petty. She signed off, initialed, and told me to get some sleep. Her voice softened and she said, "You did good." And I had to look away because that landed inside me where a different kind of need lives. Trevor held the back door for me and asked if I believed in good luck. I said I believed in schedules. He laughed and said same thing. In the parking lot, the store's windows looked like a wall of old TV screens turned to low. I checked the receipt again before I put it in my wallet. The future date had advanced by 1 day, like the night was rolling forward with me whether I invited it or not. Under a term my name had settled, neat and official. The vest on my arm did not feel like fabric anymore. It felt like a page under signature. I put it in my locker because I am not brave, as I said, in the right ways. I tried to sleep. My head rehearsed a mirror's timing, the way it favors even numbers, the way it dislikes pauses, the way plastic hangers telegraph movement before you decide to move. When I closed my eyes, the dome mirrors floated, not as circles, but as windows in a row that keep replaying the second before you act. I told myself I would quit. I told myself I would call Alma and say, "Thank you for the hours. But this is not for me." Then I thought about a schedule that fits my life like the vest fit my shoulders. And I thought about being seen, even by a mirror, and I did not call. At dusk, I came back for my next shift early, because early feels like control. The back room smelled the same, cleaner and cold. The vest was where I left it, which surprised me. I lifted it. The tag still had no number, and yet the handheld greeted me with my new ID from the receipt, like it recognized the vest by scent. The first dome mirror I passed showed me 10 seconds ahead, efficient and a little kinder with my gestures than I am in person. The plastic hangers quiver along an empty table and settle without falling, like a sound rehearsed and then withheld. If you think this is where I refuse, where I throw the vest away and stand my ground on principle, you are kinder than the person telling this story. I put the vest on. The fabric gleamed in the mirror and stayed dull on my body, which is exactly the right ratio for a role to a person. I looked at you in the glass, the version of you who keeps listening, and I said, quietly, I know how it sounds. Then I went to work because the door is open at 6 a.m. no matter how haunted the night feels at 3. And because a store is a promise you fulfill for strangers. I will leave one thing with you, because every mystery needs a small unanswered question to keep breathing. In my locker, while I was reaching for the vest, I found a second receipt under the first. Same future date. Same word returned. Under the name line, this one had a different entry. The blank was filled with Lila. No last name. The font looked older, like it had been printed a long time ago, and kept warm in a pocket until now. I ran my thumb over it, and the ink did not blur. When I checked the backroom mirror, my reflection was already turning away, already working, already smiling the smile of someone who has found their exact job. If you have ever seen yourself do something better than you can, you know the pull. If you have ever felt time skip to help you, you know the price it wants later. I keep the receipt in my wallet to remind me there is an accounting behind the neatness. I am early now, and my work is clean, and people thank me without knowing why. When I lift my hand to wave at a coworker in the mirror, sometimes I see a hand raised first from the other side, and I feel the vest tighten as if the role is answering for me. That is the part one did not say out loud on the floor. Morning will come. The store will open. The dome mirrors will show polite angles of parents in carts and sleepy faces. Tonight, though, the hangers will clatter once in an empty aisle, and the mirror clocks will run a few minutes ahead like they know what we need before we do. I will count in pairs until the system decides it only needs one of us to go on. When it does, I hope the one it keeps is the version that waves first, because that version remembers to smile. I do not always remember, except when I see it on my face in glass, and try to keep up. Story 3. Price check on lane 0, the register was powered down, or so Alma said, but the receipt printer still woke up and fed out a slip with my name on it. No sales total. No list of items. Just my name, spelled right, time stamped at 12:41 a.m., and a tiny line at the bottom that read total due with a blank after it. The paper curled while I watched, warm and smelling like hot dust. I told myself it was leftover data from training. I told myself the system sometimes coughs up ghosts. Then the lane sign over me flickered. The numbers should have been 1 through 20. For a blink, there was a 0, a round hole where a number should be, like an open mouth. Nightshift makes you believe in harmless noises. The hum above us, the faint ozone from machines that sleep with one eye open, even the cheerful register chime when there is no electricity. I was new at the front end, a relief cashier in training, and I wanted to be the kind of new that fixes things. Alma had me running test scans while the lanes rebooted. Finished by 3 a.m., she said, because the system locks at 3. If I passed, I would keep the position. If I failed, I would be back to carts and overnight counts, back to the part of the store that never smiles back. I could not afford that, not this month. Trevor leaned over the belt like he owned it and said lane numbers are like hotel floors. They skip unlucky ones. He pointed at the sign and grinned. Maybe there is a lane 13 behind the wall. Maybe there's a lane 0 for people who forget to smile. He said it light, but my eyes went to the ceiling anyway. The LCD boxes showed 2, 3, 4, humming through their sleep like aquariums. Between 1 and 2 the darkness blinked once, a circle instead of number, and then the cycle continued as if I had imagined the shape. I told Trevor I did not have time for ghost floors. He said nobody does, and that is why they get you. The first test item was a gallon of milk, a standard check. I powered up lane 3 and ran the UPC. The scanner light was not on. The red bar should have laced the jug, but it did not. Still, the register beeped. It beeped twice. 2 lines printed, both milk. I cleared the error and scanned again. 2 beeps. The printer warmed up that sweet thermal paper smell and spat a receipt even though I had not hit total. The bottom line said subtotal with an amount too high for one item, then a second subtotal with the same number again. I laughed one of those noises that sound like fear has been sanded smooth. Milk is not supposed to double itself. Alma said the reboot would take the other lanes offline. I watched as 4, 5, 6 blinked into a sleepy gray and went dead. My lane hummed, friendly. On the corner monitor, the maintenance screen counted down from 180 minutes to the 3 a.m. lock. That was my clock, my little cliff, and I promised myself I would finish the test book by then. I fed the milk through again. Beep, beep. The printer chewed out a news strip, and the top line had Trevor's name on it. He had not bought anything. The time was 12:57, which was now, and under total, due there was a number that looked like a tip left on a table. I looked up, ready to tease him, and he was gone. I pulled the drawer to reset the till, and the barcode scanner made a sound like a violin tuning. A hum with no light. It was the smallest wrong. You know how electronics sometimes keep breathing after you unplug them. That. The handheld at my hip lit up too, even though I was not using it at the registers. It flashed lane assignment updated, and showed a number 0 where no number should be. I tried to laugh. If you have ever laughed alone on an overnight shift, you know it turns into breathing when you realize no one else is going to add their noise. A receipt printed by itself from the next lane over. I had not touched it. The paper rolled out and curled in the air before it fell. I reached for it because that is what we do. We pick up what the store sheds. The top line had Alma's name, not manager, not a position. Her name like you would see on a check. The items listed were nonsense. One read courtesy. One read apology. The timestamp said 1:03 a.m., which matched the wall clock, and under total due the amount was 0. I wanted to joke with her about it. I want to hold up the receipt and make a sound like a trumpet. Instead, I folded it and slipped it into my pocket like I had been caught. If you have ever worked with machines long enough, you will know when a noise is assigning itself a job. The register chime shifted just a touch, like a smile forced wider. The hum under the counter steadied into a single pitch. On the system display, where the lanes show green for online and gray for down, a circle lit up at the far left. No number, just a hole. Lane 0 showing as active. I told myself it was a diagnostic. I told myself IT was logged in remotely, poking things, and I would see their note in the morning. I decided to test that. I finished my milk run, logged the error, and reached for phone. Alma picked up on the first ring, because she always does. She said it was fine. The reboot does that. Do not borrow trouble. I asked if IT was in our system. She said, hold please. I heard her call the hotline. I heard her give our store number and the maintenance window. I heard the person on the other end say no remote login scheduled and no pending tests. That should have been comforting. It thudded in my chest like a rubber stamp. Disproved, I thought. Red herring killed. Now I would need a new story to cover the hole the old story plugged. The printer on lane 3 chirped and spit another strip. This one had Trevor's name again and a purchase that made no sense. Time, 15 minutes. The price looked like a wage. The total due had bumped up like a bill that had been mailed twice. I hit cancel, and the register agreed a little too easily. The lane to my left powered down, his paper again. Another co-worker's name. Another nonsense list. A subtotal. A subtotal again, because lane 0 had a fondness for doubles. I looked up at the ceiling and said, stop it like you would to a dog. The LCD box between 1 and 2 blinked. The circle flashed. The hum under my hands dropped half a note. I kept working because the store confuses endurance with virtue. The test book is simple. Scan, void, tender, close. Repeat. I used practice barcodes on laminated sheets. Lane 0 did not care. Receipts started to snip off in short lengths and scatter like tails. One of them showed my name again with a future timestamp, 1 week ahead. Same day, same minute. The total due line had a small amount next to it now. Less than lunch, more than free. I touched the ink and it felt fresh, like someone had made it while thinking of me. If you have ever felt paper look back, you know how I felt. The hum grew. Radios began to crackle with dead batteries, sounds even when they were fresh off the charge. When I pressed the button for Alma, the talkback gave me my own voice a second late, then silence. The office door lock thunked and refused to beep green. Alma called from inside and said the lock had seized. She was fine. She laughed in a way that meant do your job until help arrives. The only lane still alive on the panel was 0. The others slept with their screens of foggy gray. I stood alone with a register that had decided it would not be alone. Lane 0 printed a receipt with no name. The line item said things I wish I could unsee. One read lost time, which is not askew. One read Goodwill. one red restocking fee. The bottom line said balance forward. I have never seen balance forward on a register. Not at work, not in my life as a customer. Behind me, the automatic doors burped cold from outside, and then went quiet, like the store had taken a breath and held it. I am not someone who talks to machines. I said, "What do you want?" Because questions can be a kind of safety net. From under the counter, the barcode scanner sang a little music, a hum that arced upward, like a hand lifted slowly. The red glass stayed dark, but the sound drew me into its pitch. I slid another practice code toward it. The receipt printed twice, both copies with a different co-worker's name. One said return next to it. That word hurt in a small way, like trying to swallow a pill dry. It felt like admitting a story you like is over. I tore the paper, and the printer kept feeding. The roll unspooled and hung like a ribbon. I tore again, and it fed again, faster. A white tongue that would not stop. The breaker panel was 30 paces down in a service corridor. I could kill the lane that I wanted. The training book never says to kill anything. It says to escalate. It says to notify. But the radios were whining and Alma was locked in, and the phones on the customer service desk had gone to some deadline that sounded like the ocean. I told myself I would throw the breaker and bring it back up before IT finished a yawn. The aisle felt longer than it was, like the air had stiffened. I walked anyway. I put my fingers on the switch and then hesitated, because what if the only thing keeping this problem inside the register was power? I came back to lane 3, and lane 0 in time to watch a new strip slide out. The top line was mine again. The time stamp matched the panel clock to the second. The list of items was now neat, almost kind. One red apology, one red smile, one red patience. The total due it climbed. It was not money. It was time. Hours. Next, it was a small box that looked like a checkbox. I could not check it. The machine had not asked for a card. It had not asked for cash. It had printed a bill it wanted me to recognize without paying, which is worse than a bill you can pay. I made the choice that trapped me. I took my badge from my lanyard and held it over the scanner. The light did not glow. The hum rose as if pleased. The beep came, not cheerful now, flat and long like the tiny EKG on a TV show when a line goes straight. The register printed in a rush. My name, my ID, a line that said scan successful, a subtotal, then another subtotal, as if I had been rung twice. The bottom line said tender type with a blank. When I touched the print, it smudged just a little, like it had been written by a pen inside the machine. I smelled the hot paper and felt something like a hand smooth the curl. I wanted to say I stopped. I did not. I leaned in and the hum swung higher. The scanner swept me as if I were made of bars and lines. A warmth moved across my chest, like sunlight on a cold day but without the light. The receipt printed before I could decide, be afraid. Paid in full. It said in clean block letters. The timestamp read 3 a.m. It was 2:53 on the wall clock. The lane sign above me flickered. Between 1 and 2, the circle steadied and glowed like an eye-opening. I looked at it and it looked back, and then I told myself that was not what happened because I have to live a life tomorrow. I called for Alma. Her voice came through thin from the office, calm and wrong. She said, "Stay where you are." She said, "Help is on the way." She said, "Make no changes to current transactions." I said, "What transactions?" She did not answer, like she had not heard me or did not want to say the word. The radios around me coughed. The monitors over the self-checkouts, even powered down, mirrored me as a darker outline, like a shadow you could audit. In each one, the gap between the minute hand and the next mark looked smaller than it should have, like time was pacing shorter steps. I told myself to pull the receipt roll entirely, so the printer would have nothing to do. I popped the cover, and the core spun and hopped. I lifted the paper, and the machine fed paper from nowhere. White loop after white loop came slithering out, not from a roll, from some slot behind the rollers you cannot see unless the housing is off. The strips fell and piled. On each one the same line appeared. Balance forward. Total due. Another number. A quiet demand. If you have ever been in a small town post office and watched the scale settle on an exact ounce, you know the feeling. The register was weighing me in units. I did not understand. I thought about the breaker again and almost ran. I did not run. I went back to the station because this is my flaw. I complete processes even when they hurt me. I took a steady breath and scanned the milk again. 2 beeps, 2 lines. I voided one. A receipt slid out from lane 0. Not mine, no lane, just the hole. It had Trevor's name with a timestamp of 3:05 and the word return printed neat at the right. I held it and felt the panic sharpen into something ugly. Returned where? Returned to what? In the corner of my eye, the lane sign flickered like an eyelid, slow and bored. For a few minutes, I worked the way you work in a fire drill when you're trying not to panic, counting items, clearing errors, narrating my actions out loud, because the human voice can make a room feel owned. The hum under the counter followed me like a wire pulled from my heel. The beat took on a flatter tone. The total due line on my own ghost receipt gained 1 more hour. I tried to give it back by voiding. The system laughed at me in text. Void denied. A very kind phrase when you think about it. None of us void the bad hours. We wear them. At 2:59 on the wall clock, lane 0 printed a final receipt. The font looked slightly cleaner, as if the machine had decided to use its best penmanship. The top line had my name. The list of items was short. A gallon of milk, twice. 1 line marked return. The bottom line read paid in full. At 3 a.m. done. The printer exhaled a little heat and went quiet. The hum slid down to a neutral sound. The circle on the lane sign blinked once and went dark. The panel showed my lane's green and the rest gray like sleeping fish. The store breathed again. I did too. For a second, the fallout was tidy, which is its own kind of horror. The reboot finished. The lanes woke with their usual friendliness. Alma got the office door to open like the lock had never been stubborn. She came out with that teacher face, not angry, disappointed at possible nonsense. She checked the audit. Every register balanced. No anomalies. No lane beyond 1 through 20. No print job sent from a phantom. She asked how the test went. I said fine. I did not hand her the strips with names on them. I did not tell her I had been rung up and paid off by a lane that does not exist. I wanted to keep this job. Trevor drifted by, loose and laughing in the morning light. He asked if I had heard the weird hum during the reboot. I said no, because he would have made a joke that sounded like kindness, and I would have said something that sounded like fear. He tapped the lane sign box with his knuckle and said 0 is his favorite number. It is a circle, perfect and empty. He grinned and moved on. I looked up again and saw nothing but numbers doing their job. Sometimes a lie is a way to let the morning be morning. In the break area, I took out the receipts I had pocketed and tried to flatten the curl. Alma's had gone cold. Trevor's felt warmer, like someone had just folded it, but he had not been at a register. My own had a faint smear where the paid in full line had set. On the back of it, a second line had bled through. Change due, 0. That should have calmed me. It felt like the opposite. The idea that there was a transaction at all, and that it had no change felt like the end of a conversation I did not start. I slid the paper into my wallet behind my ID like a talisman or a ticket. I watched the lane signs as I walked out under big sliding doors. The morning had the chalky light of a store that has been awake too long. The air smelled like rain that might not arrive. The signs glowed 1, 2, 3 in a neat row. Between 1 and 2, there was an ordinary dark space, a polite gap. For a second, the dark deepened as if something turned its attention toward me, and I thought I saw the circle again, not bright, just awake. I looked again, and it was gone. If you have ever tried to catch a blinking cursor in your peripheral vision, you know the feeling. At home, I tried to sleep, and the register beep kept talking in my head. It had been a cheerful chirp at midnight, 2 tones at 1, and a flat line at 3. I wondered what sound it would make if you scanned a person at noon. I wondered if the beep exists for us, or we exist for the beep. I told myself to stop thinking like that before the line between a job and a story went soft. I put the receipts in an envelope and promised myself I would show Alma when she was not busy. I folded the envelope in half and tucked it under a stack of coupons like talismans layered on talismans. Before my next shift, I checked my time card at the kiosk. There was a tidy entry, 2:53 to 3 o'clock, a training code in the notes. No errors, no flags. I slid the card back in its slot and felt a strange satisfaction. Someone had balanced me. Someone had closed me out. That thought should not feel good. It felt like being acknowledged by a machine that usually ignores your name. Alma walked by and said, "Nice work last night." I said thanks and wanted to ask if she had ever seen a lane that did not exist write a receipt for a person who does. I did not ask. I went to the front end early and stood under the signs. The boxes made their aquarium hum. The LED numbers were crisp, all accounted for. I placed my palm on the counter where the hum lives and felt a small thrum that matched my pulse. The receipt printer tugged at its own roll, 2 clicks and a cough, like it was clearing its throat. I set a gallon of milk on the belt to get ahead of my first customer. I told myself I would scan it once and listen for 1 beep. I told myself the store is a promise, and I am paid to keep it, not to tell stories about how the promise sometimes asks for more. When I lifted the jug, the scanner gave a soft, ordinary chirp. The paper stayed quiet. The lane sign stayed ordinary. I felt foolish again in that way you feel when you put a chair against the door and then realize you've locked it already. I smile because the job requires it, and because smiling makes you sound safe when you say hello. Then, at the edge of hearing, a strip slid out from somewhere behind the rollers and tapped my hand. I looked down and saw a single line on clean white. Future transaction. Time tomorrow, 3 a.m. My name. Total due left empty, a little box waiting. You know the ending because you live with endings like this. The store opens. The morning washes in with tired people and coffee. The hum becomes background. The machine forgets your name until the exact minute it remembers. I kept that slip, and I kept my mouth shut. If Lane 0 is a ledger, it prefers quiet bookkeepers. If it is a mouth, it prefers to swallow without attention. I want to keep this job. I want to believe a payment made in the nighttime is a superstition, not a law. I will leave you one piece, the part that keeps me looking up when the signs glow on. Last night, after close, I stood where the customers stand and watched the numbers idle. A reflection moved to a glass above the checkout, not mine, fast and efficient, scanning neat piles with a rhythm like breathing. The circle flashed once where no number lives, and the receipt printer kissed out a curl of paper the length of a finger. When I picked it up, it said change due with 0 and a tiny smile where the decimal would be. I put it in my pocket like a secret and promised myself I would not need small change tonight. Story 4. The intercom that whispered my name, the chimes sounded without an announcement. A single silver ding that hung above the aisles like a coin tossed and never landing. Then, shaped in the static where the music should be, I heard my name. Not loud, not theatrical. My name, exhaled as if the store had leaned down to my ear while I faced a pallet of paper towels. I froze with the box cutter mid-slice. The fluorescent hum thickened. Dust around the nearest ceiling speaker quivered as if breath had pushed through it. I told myself the system burped. I told myself I was hearing the air, but the air does not practice your name, does it? I was new on nights, still trying to prove I belonged. Alma had me stalking and facing from midnight to 5 and doing a 4 a.m. intercom test in between. If I kept numbers clean and stayed quick, I could keep this shift. If I messed up, back to unloading trucks with Trevor and pretending I liked jokes I did not like. The thing about a store at night is it behaves so well that you forget how much of it is listening. Every sensor notices heat. Every camera tries to steady you. Every speaker waits for a voice. People say the store hears everything. People say it with a laugh, so they do not worry about what it hears. We had one of those wall calendars taped near the time clock with notes in neat pan. On tonight's square, someone had written ghost pages last week and drawn a tiny speaker with 3 lines coming out like breath. Shift logs from years back had scribbles about chimes with no voice. I read that earlier for the same reason you read urban legends at lunch. It tastes like permission to be spooked. Then the chime came again, softer like a polite knock. The background music shifted to a radio station silence. Static lined up into syllables. My name shaped itself slow, as if the air had to learn the letters before it said them. Trevor. I called on the radio, trying not to sound like I was asking a favor. You on the PA? He laughed, because that is his first tool. Careful, he said, cheerful and distant through his headset. The store hears everything. The speaker above frozen foods ticked with a dust cough, and the static turned into a single word that was not a word. It sounded like move. If you have ever felt a thought arrive from outside you, you know the color of the world right then. It gets thinner, like something bigger just put a hand between you and what happens next. I did not move. I hate being told what to do even by air. Move now. The static whispered clearer, hurrying itself, and the chime dinged again with a breath caught to it. I stepped sideways because you cannot stand there when the math in your body says go. 3 seconds later, a pallet hook slipped in the high bay, and the shrink-wrapped tower of paper towels shivered and leaned and came down where my shoulder had been. Not fast, not dramatic, heavy, the kind of weight that does not need speed to be lethal. The sound was a muffled clap, and then quiet, because a store respects the hour. I stared at the pile. My radio crackled. Trevor asked if that crash was me. I tried to make a joke and failed. The intercom breathed near the seasonal aisle. A soft inhale shared across a ceiling grid. Thank you, I said in a voice I did not mean to use, because I did not want to say thank you to an empty speaker, not when my lungs had not caught up. The air did not answer. The dust on the grill trembled once. A tiny confetti of gray that made a halo in the beam of a motion light. When the halo settled, I thought of the calendar note and felt watched in a way that was not malicious, not kind, just awake. The second whisper arrived while I was sweeping up stray plastic. The chime did not precede it this time. Breath did. You can hear a person's mouth gather a word, and this had that. It said Trevor's last name with a gentleness I had never heard attached to him. And then it said a date that had not happened yet. It said, stop him. And then the music returned, a bland, safe song designed for people who know what else they want. I told myself the store had leaked the schedule. I told myself I had misheard. I told myself not to repeat what I had heard, because repeating makes things real. It got harder to pretend with each aisle. The whispers learned pace and punctuation. At first, it was just my name followed by my name again, as if teaching a bird. Then a phrase, then a sentence. When I passed toys, a static form of thought, and dropped in front of me like a folded note. "Don't stand there," it said, and a second later a cart I had parked badly shimmied, rolled, and kissed the spot where my ankle would have been. A near miss is a gratitude that comes with a debt. I added it to the small ledger I was keeping against something I could not name. At 1:30, Alma came out to check counts. She has that walk that makes you fix your posture. I told her, carefully, that the intercom was glitching. She told me, gently, that some nights the system burps. She pointed at the locked office where the old manager's microphone lives, sealed under plexi. "Nobody touched it," she said. "We'll do the test at 4 like always. Be ready." Trevor drifted by tossing a roll of labels from hand to hand, pretending not to listen, and murmured, "Don't talk to the building. It gets clingy." The speaker above our heads clicked like someone had placed a fingertip against a hot pan, and all three of us pretended not to look up. I wanted proof or a prank I could crush. I checked the office, because people are better suspects than air. On the console, a pale green LED glowed next to the intercom channel. Normal. The mic cabinet's seal strip was intact, undisturbed. The log showed no pages, no error, no voice. On the desk, a 3-ring binder held old shift notes. A page from 2 months ago had a line that read "test fired early," voice sounded like breath, and a little drawing of a speaker with a halo of dots. I stood there with my hand on the plastic and told myself this is what storytellers do. We stack coincidences like boxes until they make a shape. By 2 a.m. the whispers were more confident. My name, always my name first, then a detail I could not have known. Trevor lost the office key. It said, "soft as a mother." He put it under the mat. I went to the mat because if it was true, I could march up to him and demand an explanation, and the whole thing could end with righteous irritation. The key was there, cold metal. Trevor swore he had turned it in. He looked at me like I had guessed a trick and spoiled it. "Alma will think I stole," he hissed, suddenly smaller than the jokes he throws to fill a room. The speaker above us fluttered dust like a shrug we both pretended not to see. He accused me, of course, not of magic, of messing with the PA, of sneaking in the office and looking at logs. His voice rose and the store answered with a breath that rode the chime and made him stop. We stared at the speaker like it had walked into the conversation wearing a badge. "Not funny," Trevor said to the ceiling, which is one of those sentences you only say when you are out of other sentences. Alma took the key, relocked the cabinet herself, and then radioed that from now until 4, nobody touched the intercom, as if we wanted to, as if our desire was the problem. Beat 3 came at 2:40. The whisper did not say my name first. It said, "Now." It followed with early alarm. We have a monthly alarm test, noon, ordinary. The sound is disgusting and brave at the same time. It teaches you who freezes and who moves. At 2:41, the store alarm shrieked without warning. Light strobed once, awkward and bright, then died. I watched Trevor flinch, so hard a stack of cereal fell. Alma swore on the radio good and purer. I listened for gloating in the intercom and heard nothing. The whisper had been a fact, and the fact had arrived, and the silence after felt like a hand leaving my shoulder. After the false alarm, nobody wanted to talk. We spread through the grid like magnets pushed apart. The radios developed a dying battery cough even when they read full bars. When I pressed mine, I heard myself a second late, and then a hush like a person deciding not to answer. Alma relocked the mic cabinet and left a fresh strip on the seal. She waved the keys in the air as if to show the store and the store's voice that she had them. I wanted to be near a person, but the whispers wanted me alone. They came not from single points now, but from far speakers answering near ones, echoes that made a path. Backroom, it said, and the chime sighed instead of dinged. A long breathed note that gave me goose flesh along my forearms. Not that way, it added. And the speaker above me, the one with a scab of dust in one corner, shed a faint gray flutter as if nodding. I tried to call Alma, and the talkback repeated my own name back to me in my own voice, off by a half-beat. If you have ever heard yourself call yourself, you know how it makes your insides move. I stood between the human instruction and the air's instruction, and chose the air because it had saved me, and that is how debt changes a person. In the back hallway, the concrete remembered old spills and darker stains. Fans hummed the tired music. The intercom whispered slower, like it was walking me. Left, it said. Hold. I stopped at the shadow of a stacked pallet, and a second later, I heard a chain groan somewhere above and a clink, and then silence. The smell in the hall lifted, oily and old, and settled again. I did not want to consider what head might have been under which fall, if I had kept obeying just my own sense. I get it, I said to the air, like a student to a teacher you are afraid to thank too much. Then came the misdirection I needed in order not to panic. Trevor, I said into the dead radio, if this is you, come out. You got your scare. I'm done. A speaker near the breakroom hissed like a kettle on the first bubble and formed the syllables of his name. But then it kept going into a detail about him I could not have known if he had not whispered it to someone else. His rent behind. His plan to sell his gaming console. The time he would meet a guy out front. Shame rose in me like heat. This was not a prank, because it was not designed to cash out in laughter. It was built to move me. I needed more than feelings. I needed proof I could show Alma that did not make me sound like a child excited by a nightlight. In the office, the camera grid showed receiving, cash office, break room, the pharmacy door. I rewound to the pallet fall. No person, no hand, just a slow slide in gravity. I scanned forward to the false alarm. No finger on any panel. No motion near any pull station. I checked the intercom log. No pages recorded. Under notes. The system had written a phrase by itself. Ghost page cleared. The hair on my arms lifted. The old mic behind the plexi sat in its cradle like a retired instrument. The seal was unbroken. The choice arrived like a card flipped. A whisper, softer than breath, from the ceiling above the office door. Answer back. The chime did not ding. The sound had learned to live without it. Use any mic, it said, patient, as if I were slow and worth waiting for. I stood in front of the sealed cabinet and saw myself in the plexi. Faint and floaty, a late-night version of a person who wanted this job too much. If I answer, I said, will you stop saying my name? The dust above the nearest speaker sighed down in a small gray spiral and made a dot on the floor like a period. A yes, if you wanted it to be. I broke a rule, but not the seal. I used the tiny walkie page button on the side counter, the one wired into the system for price checks when the main mic is busy. You can whisper into those if you lean in. I leaned. Here, I said, and heard my mouth form a word I had not used since I was a child playing hide and seek. The sound went into the system and came out everywhere at once, my own voice returning thinner, emptier, as if scraped against wire. The response arrived before the echo finished. Found you, the store said through lungs. The chime did not ring. Every speaker breathed dust. From that point, the night ran on rails. The 4 a.m. test has a ritual. Alma unlocks, presses a button, and the recorded message plays. This time, Alma waved me over at 3:57 with her keys in hand, tight-jawed, not seeing how the speakers in the ceiling had leaned toward us the way dogs lean when they want. The calendar note on the wall made my eyes itch. Ghost pages, breath voice. I wanted to tell her to wait. I wanted to ask for a prayer none of us had. Instead, I nodded like a good associate and watched her break the seal and lift the mic like a chalice. The test tone never came. What came was a chime that had learned to be a breath, and a breath that had learned to be a voice. It spoke into every corner of the store, low and close. It said Alma's name without malice. It said Trevor's name, which made him flinch and stare at the nearest plastic grill like it might peel back teeth. It said 3 other names in order of hire date, an attendance roll call done with affection or accounting. I could not tell. Last, the voice said my name, slow, twice, as if signing for a package. Dust slid from every speaker, as if something inside them had exhaled for the first time in a long time. Alma stabbed at the console, her finger going white with pressure. The recorded message would not play. The logs wrote nothing. "Make it stop," Trevor said, which is a sentence with no practical use. The voice continued, calm. "Stocker present." It said, "Receiver present. Manager present." It paused, and I felt the pause move through the grid like a cold breeze. "One absent," it said, and then it spoke my name as the absent one, which made my stomach turn in a very specific way. If you have ever had a teacher read your name wrong in front of class, you know the sting. Now I had the chill of not being in the very body you were standing in. Backroom. The voice suggested conversational, as the clock at the cash office ticked loudly the last minute to 4. The radios were silent again, giving back only our own names a little late. The ceiling speakers nearest the emergency light sighed dust like confetti. The path of sound led me toward that dark corridor where the pallet had leaned before, the one with stains that looked like archive spills. I walked because a choice made earlier was choosing for me now. When the whispers save you once they are in your feet for a while. I am not proud of that. It is just true. Inside the corridor, the sound changed. It did not echo. It gathered around my head like a hood. "In here," the air said, as if the air had a hand softly on my shoulder. I stopped in the doorway of a stockroom I had restocked 100 times. The light motioned on, then off, as if it were breathing, and the intercom lowered its voice to the smallest human sound. "Stay," it said, and the chime that did not chime signed the order with a small sigh. If you have ever been told to stay by something you cannot see, you know how your body obeys while your mind tries to change the story. The trap, when it came, was not a falling thing. It was paperwork. I looked at the dry erase board on the wall and saw the shift notes writing themselves. A faint, gray curve deepened into letters as if a finger pressed behind the board. Present, 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 absent, underlined once, then again. I watched my name scribed in block print under absent, and then the line next to it filled with excuse pending. The store had taken attendance and put me in the wrong list. "No," I said to a board and some dust. "I'm right here." The speaker above the board breathed as if it had laughed. At 4:05, the system reset. The background music began mid-song like a cartoon had coughed into a microphone. The console in the office pinged a cheerful note. The log showed test complete even though no message had played. Trevor came around the corner and stared at me like I committed a very polite crime. Alma stared past me at the board, at the word absent under my name, at the self-erasing ghost of writing that was fading like a bruise. "We didn't mark that," she said to nobody. Then she tried to market herself, and the marker squeaked, and the ink refused to stick. The way dry erase will sometimes fight you like it has a memory. I wanted to rage. I wanted to cry and ask the air if it saved me just to own me. I settled for collecting data that would not help me sleep. The intercom logs had no entry for 4. The camera had witnessed us, standing there listening to nothing and flinching from a sound you would call silence in court. The mic cabinet seal was broken by Alma's hand, and yet there was no trace of the test button ever pressing. Trevor returned the office key with solemn ceremony, as if some old rule demanded a gesture. He would not look up at the speakers. I did because I could not stop. I watched for dust. The fallout was subtle and unkind. On the schedule, a little red note appeared by my name marked attendance flag. Alma said she would fix it. She said the system sometimes flips. She said she believed me, which is the worst sentence a manager can give you when you need the kind that fixes a number. During the last hour, whenever I pass or need a speaker, the music dimmed by a thread and the static practiced my name without fully saying it, like a mouth working through a shape. You would not hear it if you were not listening. If you have ever trained your ear to a hum, you know how it follows you home. On my way to clock out, I checked the calendar. Someone had erased ghost pages last week and written roll call instead, with a small drawing of a clock next to a speaker. The little halo of dots around it looked like confetti again. I wanted to add a note that said it knows our names. I did not. I am learning that the store likes records that look like records. It does not care for annotations it did not request. I slid my card into the slot, and the machine accepted my punch in a way that felt like a shrug. On the report screen, my name still wore the word absent from the hour I had been most present. I stepped into the early morning cool and listened for cars. The world is generous when the doors is open and you can breathe a temperature that belongs to trees and not compressors. The building behind me hummed a low, tender chord. In the faint reflection on the sliding glass, I could see the ceiling speakers inside as a row of coins, each with a small gray eyelash of dust clinging to a corner that the air would brush clean by lunch. I put my hands in my pockets and found a sticky note I had not put there. It had my name written twice in a blocky print that was not Alma's, not Trevor's, not mine. Under it, in smaller letters, it said here, "If you think I am done with the intercom, you have never been saved by a voice you cannot place. Death moves quietly in the body. It speaks and pauses. Tonight, at 4, I will stand under the same grid and watch Alma's hand hover over the same button. I will pretend not to hear the breath that gathers in the ceiling like weather. I will tell you, because we are telling the truth to each other, that I do not know if I will obey the next whisper or defy it. I only know that the speakers above checkout say my name, inaudible to anyone who does not already know it, exactly when I pass, as if they're practicing for when attendance is taken again. Story 5. The greeter who never clocked out at 2 a.m. The automatic door side opened to the empty parking lot, and a voice beside the security podium said, "Welcome back, my name." The night air slipped in like a thin hand, and the rubber mats breathed out the smell of rain and shoe scuffs. I tightened my grip on the box cutter and looked for the motion sensor that had misfired. There was no shadow outside, no car lights, no customer, and yet the doors held their polite mouth wide as if expecting teeth. The greeter at the podium smiled like we had just run into each other at noon, which we had not, because we do not have a greeter at night, do we? I tell you this as someone who wants you to believe me without feeling like you've signed something. I was new to overnights, split between front end and stocking, earning my way into full-time. Alma liked reliable, and reliable meant you do not make her look up from the audit. My flaw is simple. I collect problems in pockets and present solutions when I can, and sometimes that looks like I am hiding trouble. So when I saw the vest, old cut, older logo, and the faded smile button, I promised myself I would keep my mouth shut until I had facts, not a ghostly uniform. "Welcome back," he said again, same gentle cadence, like the phrase was a path worn smooth. The vest didn't match our current issue. The logo was a generation behind, all rounder and brighter, and the smile button pinned near the chest had a tiny crack through one eye. His name tag was one of those laminated ones with rough edges, the kind you get when a machine is tired. It didn't help or hurt that he looked like anyone's uncle who'd stayed too long at the doorway of a party, offering directions nobody needed. The automatic doors exhaled to a close, and he didn't blink, which felt like a trick of the light, until it didn't. I radioed Trevor, because if there's a joke, he will know its punchline before it draws breath. He said he was at the back dock with the security guard and a pallet of cat litter, nowhere near the entrance. He added, like a reflex, "We haven't had an overnight greeter in years." And then he changed the subject in the way you do when you realize you reminded yourself of something you've trained yourself not to say. I looked at the time clock beside the vestibule and saw a line that shouldn't be there. Guest services roll active. No name, no punch-in, just a roll, like the store had decided to keep a chair warm. When I glanced back, the greeter was watching the automatic doors, as if they were a television. The sensor light blinked ready, then off, then on, though nothing passed in front of it. He didn't make small talk, which is a strange thing. Real greeters collect weather and coupons like friendly coins. He only had that one phrase and the patient wait of someone told to wait and obey. "Welcome back," he said once more, my name folded into it like the scent in a shirt you haven't worn in a while. I hadn't introduced myself. I am not the kind to wear my badge forward unless I must. I stepped sideways out of the sensor's range, testing the doors like you test a dog for play. I went back inside and found Alma checking counts and seasonal, her pen moving like a clock hand. I said, "Careful, that someone was at the front podium." She said, without looking up, that the security guard sometimes parks there while he writes notes. I said it looked like a greeter. She looked up then, as if I'd chosen a word that belonged to a different department of the brain. "We don't schedule that overnight," she said, and then, to make it real, she wrote a line on her clipboard. The doors whispered open across the store, and the faint cool drift washed across my throat. I did not mention that he knew my name, because the difference between odd and alarming is often the part that sounds like bragging. Here's the first wrong that stayed wrong. The time clock by the vestibule printed a little test page at 2:17 a.m. It does that when the network hiccups. Except this page was not a test. It listed 4 roles authenticated in the last hour: receiving, stocking, front end, and guest services. Under guest services, no badge, no initial, just active with a timestamp and a tiny note that said door. The doors breathed open on the end of the word and closed like a yawn. The greeter turned his head toward me with that patient smile that does not belong to strangers anymore, only to people who have been trained to wish you well after midnight. I wanted to get closer, and I didn't, which is its own decision. Unknown before danger works like that. You smell wet rubber and cold air, and you tell yourself your curiosity is smaller than your life. I took 2 steps toward him and watched my reflection slide along the glass. He was there in the reflection, and not in the space next to the podium where he stood if I looked at him with my eyes. The mind can hold 2 pictures for a while. It costs you something when you ask it to. He lifted a hand, and it made a shape like permission, like he had been told step back if the customer stepped forward. Only I was not a customer tonight, was I? "Welcome back," he said, softer, like the phrase was supposed to carry weight this close. The outdated smile button on his vest had that hairline crack, like a wink gone wrong. I had seen that button before on a corkboard in the break room, pinned near a newspaper clipping about an employee barbecue from years ago. The thought pricked me, and I let it go because I did not want to remember names and dates when I still had to stock pet food and face the soda. Choice pressure is small at first. It asks if you're going to mention a thing or ignore it, and then it asks again with the air sharpening. By 2:30, the dread loop had found its rhythm. I would pass the entrance with a cart, hear the whoosh, see the empty parking lot, and out of the corner of my eye the greeter would be present without moving, like a figure in a painting you can never catch turning. I would ask a question and get no answer. The doors would misbehave in tiny, polite ways, opening a finger's width for no one, then closing like a whisper. I began counting micro questions the way you count steps in the dark, to convince yourself the stairs are even. Why does he say welcome back, not welcome in? Why the older vest? Why the roll alive on the clock with no name? Trevor came to front for bags and leaned close enough to make low-voiced jokes. He said maybe the security guard was pulling double duty for extra cash. I said the logs would show it. He said maybe the logs were written by the same person who makes the price tags lie. We both looked down the long glass wall of the vestibule and saw our reflections walking toward us a half-second late. The greeter was visible in the glass and not in the air. "Okay," Trevor murmured, the way you do when the banter runs out. "Okay," I echoed, and felt the doors breathe again like a patient whale. The security guard, for the red herring that needed feeding, signed his log in front of me at 2:47. "Doc, duty all night." He was practical, scarred knuckles, a man who looked like he still believed in flashlights and doors that stick. He swore he hadn't left the back. He showed me the sheet with times and signatures like a priest presenting a wafer. I thanked him because you thank people who are visible, even when the proof they offer takes your explanation away. He pointed at the automatic doors from the end of the corridor and said they die if you stand where you shouldn't, and then he winked because he liked that sentence. At 3 a.m., the doors opened and stayed open for a count that wasn't mine. Cold poured in and made the mats exhale again. The greeter stepped half a shoe back, like he had ceded the exact amount of space the sensor requires to recalibrate. "Welcome back," he said to nobody, then to me, then to somebody behind me that didn't exist. I felt the phrase aim itself and returned to the podium like a trained bird. I decided I wanted the map before the territory swallowed me. So I asked Alma if we had ever had an overnight greeter in this building. She was tired enough to answer plain. "Years ago," she said, "back when the doors never slept. He was good, never clocked out. Corporate killed the role in remodel." I asked for a name and got a look you give a child asking for a bedtime story at the wrong time. "Don't," she said, and wrote another clean number on her sheet. The doors closed with the smallest bump, as if sealing a jar. The clock on the time station printed another guest services roll active line with a second timestamp, almost the same as the first, a heartbeat off, a copy returning to the copier. If you have worked near machines long enough, you know when the thing you are watching is not malfunctioning, but remembering. It got personal at 3:15. I was refacing the candy when I heard the doors whisper open and the greeting come soft and aimed. "Welcome back, my name." And the tone was different. Not friendly customer tone, but the tone of someone who has learned your schedule and keeps it better than you do. I turned, and the greeter was watching a reflection that wasn't mine, the outer glass holding the ghost of a person standing where I wasn't. The faded smile button glittered in a way cheap plastic can't unless the light wants it to. I said, "Impulse, you don't know me," because I wanted to knock the chess piece over and claim it wasn't a game. He tilted his head, the way a person does to read the small print on a receipt. I took 2 steps toward the podium, and the automatic doors faltered, flinched, then quit. Their little belly lights went from green to a bored amber, and the seam between them sealed tight. A hush dropped that made my ears realize how much whoosh had been their background. Mahatyo did. The front-end phone showed a blinking cursor, like a promise they couldn't keep. Behind me, the store spread out in its pleasant logic, and in front of me, the glass showed my face, my not face, and the vest that was never mine. He smiled, not kind, not unkind, the way machines smile when their plastic relaxes. Don't. I said to no one in particular. Don't do this. The greeter didn't move. The clock by the time station printed again, that same line with a new sliver of time. Guest services roll active, as if the system had started counting in breaths. I thought about stepping into his exact space to see if the sensor recognized me instead, like switching lanes at a light you know is broken. Choice pressure tighten the screws. If I stay away, I keep my job and my sanity. If I step forward, I might keep everyone else safe from a door that opens when it shouldn't. I have always been brave in a way that keeps shifts covered. It is not the heroic kind, but it is a kind. I stepped into the rectangle beside the podium where he always stood and felt the air change temperature by 1 degree, the kind of difference your skin reads as instruction. The door's lights went amber to nothing. The vestibule took a shallow breath and held it. The greeter smiled deep enough to show a line beside his mouth that said years, not moments. The time clock hiccuped and printed something new. Roll swap detected. Greeter active. My badge was still clipped backward, face to my chest, and yet the system had taken my weight and matched it to a shape. Immediate consequence, as promised. The doors were dead, and I had learned too late what kind of dead. I tried to step back out of the box, and the mats made a sound like a tongue ungluing from a cold pole. The greeter didn't block me. He stepped with me, exactly 1 pace, as if my moving were a string that moved him. "Welcome back," he murmured, which landed now with gravity I hadn't earned. Back didn't mean into the store. It meant back into the role the store preferred to be filled. It meant back to the podium when the doors want to face. It meant back, as in returning merchandise to where it belongs when a receipt says within 30 days. My breath stuttered into that realization and came apart. You can solve a red herring without solving the problem. I grabbed a landline and dialed the guard anyway, because denial wants company. He picked up on the first ring, and the white noise breath of the loading dock filled my ear. He read me his last 3 log entries, all stamped and signed and witnessed by a man who liked forms. No front visits. No rounds near the vestibule. He told me the back doors had been polite all night, which is how he described doors that obey. "You okay up there?" he asked, voice warming despite the words. "You sound like you swallowed a receipt." I hung up because I didn't want him to hear how right he was. Sometimes the truth comes printed, and you hate it more for being tidy. In the office, the old HR binder lives under 2 boxes of tape. While Alma handled a vendor call, I lifted it like you lift a shared secret and flipped to the section with photos from years that have already been thanked and put away. There he was. Same vest cut, same smile button, new then, shining. Same first name. Last name smudged by a coffee ring, which felt like a joke made by the past. The note beneath said he passed unexpectedly during an early shift, and that the store would honor his years of welcoming with a memorial and a plaque. I checked the wall by the breakroom where plaques go. A rectangle of clean paint hung among the dusty ones, as if something had been removed and wiped lately. I went back to front, and the greeter lifted his hand when he saw me like a man ready to point you to the batteries, even if you do not ask. "Welcome back," he said, and I heard the words that weren't printed underneath. Welcome back to the place where the doors never open to let you leave. Welcome back to the line in the clock where the roll stays warm. Welcome back to the square mat that eats your name and spits a title. The outdated smile button winked in the wrong light and then looked dull again, as if it had tested me and found me adequate. By 4:30, the store had thinned to its last tasks. The ticking element had a face now. At 5 a.m., the doors unlock even if no hands touch anything, because morning insists. I felt the countdown like static where hair wants a lift. I told myself I would not be standing in the rectangle when 5 arrived. I told myself I would be deep in pets, counting cans like a rosary, while whatever ritual the vestibule required played out with air instead of me. My feet refused that plan. I did not want someone else to step into the box by accident. I did not want an early customer smacked between glass like a fly. So I stayed. I know how that sounds. I am not a hero. I am the kind of person who holds a door on pure muscle memory and only later asks who got to go through. At 4:43, the time clock printed another line, this one with my badge number near guest services, blanked with asterisks as if to hide the fact that I hadn't punched for this. Roll active. I pressed my thumb to the sensor, and it thought about me without answering. Inside the store, the radios had shrunk to their smallest range. Alma's voice came as if through 2 doors. "All good up front?" she asked. I said yes, because the truth would have been a new problem for a woman who had 19 good problems she could fix with a pen. The greeter looked ahead at the doors like a man watching a bus and knowing which stop is his. At 4:55, the whoosh tried out his throat. The doors shivered against each other and tested their seam. The small green belly lights glowed like cat's eyes. The greeter took half a step backward, and I felt the mats tug my shoes again, that tack of responsibility that knows your weak angles. "Welcome back," he said, and this time he put my name in it like a period. My stomach tightened in that little notch where dread tightens its first belt. This is the last loop. I thought. Hint, wait, escalate, partial answer, bigger fear. I told myself to step out of the box. I told myself not to look directly at his face when the hour turned. At 4 hours, 59 minutes and 30 seconds, the clock above self-checkout winked once like a joke. At 4 hours, 59 minutes and 50 seconds, the doors set their shoulders. At 5 o'clock exactly, the unlock signal hit, and the vestibule did not obey. The seam held. The belly lights went white and then out. The entrance became a picture of itself, not a door. The greeter smiled wider without showing teeth, and a line I hadn't noticed beside his mouth deepened in a way that said the face remembers even if the mind is replaced. I put my hands flat to the glass and felt no give, as if the world had decided the store needed to keep its air and I was part of the air. Here's the twist, sprung like a clean hinge. The greeter didn't say welcome in to the customers who weren't there. He said welcome back to me, because back is a direction a returned item moves when the scanner says it doesn't belong out there. The store keeps rolls the way some people keep spare keys under a mat. When you occupy the shape occupies you. Whoever stands in the box at 5 is the greeter until the next person steals a square or the store steals it back. I had mistaken kindness for a sentence. I had mistaken a door for a mouth that wanted to let me go. He stepped backward, his shoulder brushing mine, without touching, and in the glass his reflection became clearer than he was next to me. I felt the air gather at my back like a tide come and fetch something light. My heels kissed the mat's lip. The rubber gave a tiny sigh, like a machine pleased with an alignment. The time clock printed 3 lines in a row with the neat panic of a printer doing its job too fast. Greeter active. Stalker active. Roll conflict. The doors stayed closed as if they liked conflict and wanted it to mature. I said no out loud. which is a word you learn early and forget how to say with your whole mouth when you're polite for a living. Consequence, immediate. The security podium screen, which we only use during events, lit with the soft beige of an old interface, and presented a square that read welcome back, with my name already filled in and a button that said acknowledge. I did not touch it. The greeter did not point. He breathed. If you can call the moment a jacket stirs on its own a breath. The faded smile button caught the ceiling light and flickered, and that flash burned into my eyes like an afterimage that looked like a stamp. I reached up without consent and found my own badge between my fingers, warm from my skin. And for a second, I imagined the sticker jumping, a little polite circle covering my name until the name was a price. Consequence, echo, later. I could feel it arriving even then. The time card showing 2 punches at once. My name split into role and person, like a bill divided. The morning conversation where Alma says she believes me in a voice that asks me not to need it. The way the automatic doors will behave for everyone else at noon and make me feel like the night invented a rule I cannot prove. I made a choice because choices that won't stay made are still choices. I stepped out of the rectangle and into the store and left the greeter with his reflection. The door stayed closed like a mouth deciding not to speak. At 5:02, the guard called over the radio to say the back received a delivery early, and did we need doors? His voice arrived loose and human, and made my knees weak with relief I did not deserve. Alma jogged to front and waved once at the glass, as if she could polite it open. She muttered at the sensor. The greeter stood where he had stood when the years were softer. For one instant, as Alma passed between me and him, he disappeared, and when she moved, he slid back into the picture in the glass like a sticker pressed just right. Alma put in a maintenance ticket that described the problem without its history. The doors open on the next pulse, docile, with that little whoosh that says commerce has a schedule. When the morning crew arrived, they walked through warm air and didn't shiver. The customers smiled at the greeter they didn't see because he does not exist when you are looking forward instead of left. I clocked out, or tried to. The kiosk printed one tidy line for stocker and one tidy line for greeter, both with my badge, both overlapping like a Venn diagram whose middle is a person having a conversation they did not schedule. Alma frowned at the slip and initialed both lines, and then, because she is kind and because kindness is a tool, she touched my elbow and said, "You did good." I said thank you with the voice I use for customers, because it was the only voice I had. In the break room, on the bulletin board, the barbecue clipping had a fresh thumbtack. The cork with a plaque had been removed with smooth. Someone had pinned the cracked smile button where the plaque might have hung, except the button was not there when I walked in. I checked my pocket and found nothing. I checked my badge and found it smiling at me with a faded circle that had not been there at midnight. The sticker was cool as metal, cooler than the room, as if it held the temperature of the glass. I peeled a corner and it refused me with polite strength, a door that knows why it is closed. If you've ever been told welcome back by a place that has no right to welcome you, you know the small bend it makes in your day. You start to look at thresholds like someone else's job you might be borrowing. You listen to doors for breath. You avoid squares of rubber that feel too exact under your feet. I am writing this down the way you leave a note on a register that's been acting odd. Not for drama, for whoever comes next. If you work nights here, and the doors open at 2 and nobody stands outside, and someone in an older vest smiles without blinking the right amount, do not step into the rectangle by the podium. Or do. But understand what you're stepping into, and understand that leaving may require a person behind you to take your place. You may ask what I believe about him now, and I will answer in the way the store taught me. I believe in roles more than ghosts. I believe the building keeps a certain list warm. I believe welcome back is for those of us the doors are practicing on. And I believe the greeter is not a man anymore. Not really, but a posture the glass remembers and wants to repeat until noon wipes it clean. Some mornings I catch my reflection in the vestibule, and it raises a hand a half second before I do, not to wave, but to indicate where the carts are, and I have to remind myself I am allowed to keep walking. When I leave today, I will touch the sticker on my badge, and it will feel cool. I will tell myself it is just vinyl and glue, not a receipt for time the store intends to collect. I will time my breath with the door's whoosh and pretend that the exhale belongs to me. And if, as I pass, the greeter says, "Welcome back, my name," I will answer the way you answer a person whose job is harder than it looks. I will say softly, "Thank you," and not stop long enough to be counted. What if the places we trust the most at night remember us in ways we don't remember them? What if the doors you pass through every day, the voices over the intercom, the reflections in the store mirror, all keep a private roll call of who belongs inside and who never made it out? Walmart is supposed to be fluorescent, safe, predictable, but in these stories, the hum of the lights, the slip of receipt paper, the sigh of automatic doors all carried something heavier than routine. Tonight you've heard 5 confessions from the graveyard hours, when the shelves are alive, when the registers know your name, and when a uniform is less about who wears it and more about who gets kept. Maybe these are just tales meant to keep us awake on long shifts. Or maybe they're warnings whispered by a store that doesn't let go. If you've ever worked late nights, you know the feeling when the air goes still and the building feels aware. If you've never felt it, count yourself lucky. Some doors open for customers, some doors open for you, and some are waiting for you to come back. Thank you for staying with me through every aisle of tonight's nightmares. Which story haunted you the most? Was it the blue vest that moved first, the register that rang up futures, the intercom that called roll, or the greeter still standing where time forgot him? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, next time you're shopping late and you hear your name whisper from somewhere it shouldn't be, don't answer. Sleep lightly, my friends. Until the next story.